Good morning, Napa Valley Unitarian Universalists, and welcome to our online worship service. I'm Reverend Dr. Leisa Huyck, and I'm the parish minister here. With me as our celebrant this morning is Thompson Hamilton. And today we have some other very special guests. Trisha Lewis is helping us sing our closing hymn, and we're also welcoming guest musician Sara Thomsen, two local tribal elders who prefer to remain anonymous, and an intertribal drum circle led by Lakota elder Midge Wagner on sweet medicine drum. You are welcome here too. You are welcome if you bring gifts of song and dance, and you're welcome if you bring only a tattered and broken heart. You are welcome if you're bursting with energy, and you're welcome if you're weary to the bone. You're welcome if you love people of the same gender as you, and you're welcome if you love those of a different gender. You're welcome if your skin is ebony black, and you're welcome if your skin is milky white. You're also welcome if your skin color falls somewhere in between. You're welcome whatever your education, your income, your theology, and whatever you most need in life right now. Whoever you are, we are so glad you found us, and you are welcome here. All through the month of November, this congregation is asking the question, what does it mean to be a people of healing? This is a topic we especially need to consider during Native American History Month, particularly with Thanksgiving coming up this next week. For many Americans, Thanksgiving is a beautiful and important national holiday, the only one that doesn't involve buying and giving presents, the only one that's just about gathering with family and friends to give thanks for our blessings. The colonial narrative about the holiday is that pilgrims landed on Plymouth Rock and were warmly welcomed by the Wampanoag people who invited them to share in a Thanksgiving feast. School children around the country are taught to revere this story as one of cross-cultural exchange, understanding, and sharing. But for indigenous peoples of the Americas, the story of Thanksgiving has a very different meaning. The landing of the Pilgrims and their encounter with the Wampanoag people was the beginning of 500 years of genocide, as well as the destruction of the ecosystems they had lived in sustainably for thousands and thousands of years. Indigenous Americans continue to celebrate annual harvest festivals with feasting and singing and dancing and games, but the American holiday of Thanksgiving is a day of mourning. As a people of faith, we honor the inherent worth and dignity of every person and respect the interdependent web of all being of which we are part. How can we come to terms with this painful fracture in our national psyche? How can we heal our relationships with the indigenous peoples of the lands on which we live? And how can doing that Help us heal our relationships with the whole community of life. These are big questions, and we can't address all of them in just one service, but we can make a little start. So let's do that now. Come, let us bring our whole selves to this time together, and let us worship. We'll begin by centering ourselves through music.
By breath, by blood, by body, by spirit, we are all one. By breath, by blood, by body, by spirit, we are all one. The air that is my breath is the air that you are breathing, and the air that is your breath is the air that I am breathing. The wind rising in my breast is the wind from the east, from the west, from the north, from the south, breathing in, breathing out. By breath, by blood, by body, by spirit, we are all one. By breath, by blood, by body, by spirit, we are all one. The water that is my blood, my sweat, tears from crying, is the water that is your blood. Your sweat, tears from crying, and the rising of the tide is in our veins, and in the ocean wide we are in the rising steam, rushing a river, running stream. By breath, by blood, by body, by spirit, we are all one. By breath, by blood, by body, by spirit, we are all one. The earth is dust, the earth is clay, flowers blossoming and fading. We are dust and we are clay. We are blossoming and fading. Every color, every sound, every place is holy ground. Oh, every living thing. Can you hear it laugh? Can you hear it sing? By breath, by blood, by body, by spirit, we are all one. By breath, by blood, by body, by spirit, we are all one. The fire in
Each Sunday, Unitarian Universalists all over the world light a chalice, the symbol of our faith. You are invited now to light your own chalice at home, as I speak these words from Reverend Shawn Trapp. A fire in the universe. Our chalice reminds us that the fire within ourselves is the same fire that illuminates the universe. It is our reminder that all is connected, even though the space of the void is vast, and our experience here is but a blip in the cosmic timeline. The flame is our promise that in our smallness and our short time on this earth, we all live intently and deeply with love for one another, with honesty and integrity, to be guided by rational thought and critical thinking, and with a sense of shared responsibility. For as the late astronomer Carl Sagan reminds us, this pale blue dot is the only home we've ever known.
Gather in peace, gather in thanks, gather in sympathy now and then, gather in hope, compassion and strength, gather to celebrate once again. Gather the Spirit, harvest the power, our separate fires will kindle
I invite you now into a moment of receptivity and reflection as we share the joys and the sorrows of this community. We make sacred the milestones of our lives when we share them with each other. We have here a bowl of water and stones. If you have a joy or a sorrow that you would like to share with all here, you can type that into the chat and then choose a stone to represent what you have shared. If you have a joy or sorrow that you don't need to share with everyone, just type the word stone into the chat and choose a stone to represent what you are keeping in the silence of your heart.
When we share our sorrows and our joys, we knit together the disparate strands of our lives into one fabric of community. May this fabric hold us through all the tumult and the strife of the times we are experiencing now. Before we begin our time of reflection, there's something I want to share with you. In all the indigenous cultures I know, including the Choctaw Nation of my biological father, every address to the people and every prayer begins and ends with a salutation that includes all our relations. This is because indigenous peoples understand themselves to be part of the family of all life, which includes the two-leggeds, the four-leggeds, the swimming ones, the crawling ones, and the winged ones. All of these different kinds of animals are considered to be different kinds of people, not human people, but people all the same. And all of these peoples have the same rights as humans, but differ in roles and responsibilities. And not only animals, but also trees and streams and lakes and mountains and rocks and clouds and storms, every single part of the living world is considered to be a kind of people. All of these people are our relatives for whom we have a reciprocal responsibility to care. So with this in mind, I invite you now into a time of meditation and prayer. Get comfortable wherever you are and assume an attitude of both relaxation and attention. Close your eyes if that helps. Imagine your feet as the base of the tree of your being. Send roots down into the dark embrace of earth. Make your spine as straight as you can, your trunk. Let your arms be your branches, your fingers, your leaves. Feel in your leaves the beautiful lightness of sky. Feel how you grow in this place where earth and sky meet. Feel the joy they take in you and your being. Now relax again and hear these words. Great Spirit of life, Creator of beauty and joy, all our relations. The first rains of the season finally came and we are so grateful. The air is so fresh and clean and sweet that we cannot get enough of the delicious fragrance. The rains were gentle on the burned hillsides, sinking in without washing away. The seeds and roots under the soil can drink in the precious moisture and begin to swell into new life. It is a time of great relief. It is a time of healing. May we be so refreshed and healed by the beautiful rains that we ourselves can pour forth love and compassion into this beautiful and suffering world. Amen. All our relations, blessed be. Now let us join together in a time of silence. The music will bring us out.
Everybody knows the history of what the buffalo went through. The buffalo kind of suffered similar to what we did. And their lineage, which hung on by a thread, just like we barely hung on like a thread, but they came back. And now their numbers have grown. Sitting there one day and they were talking about the buffalo again, and they were being shot because they were leaving the Yellowstone. So as soon as they stepped foot off of there into private land, they got shot. They don't know no lines. All they know is what their blood tells them to roam. Buffalo still on reservations. How well we know what freedom is and how we only strive to reach real freedom that our ancestors lived. Nature damages us, even if a person unsure of bloodline, everyone can be awoken. Everyone has a reason and purpose to life. Greed, hatred, selfishness, foreign to us, but taught to us. Endangered applies when so few exist. Well, we are the fewest on our own land. Third world conditions, poverty, desecration, homelessness, to list a few situations, still exist with us to try to overcome. To gain some healing is met with trespassers will be prosecuted and no one heals them. Earth we need, water everyone and everything needs, fire we need, air we need. Earth is being polluted, depleted, not respected. Fire is needed and the sun is the greatest fire that now hurts us. Air we need to breathe is now not clean. We can see the air pollution. Progress costs, and we are paying, and our children will pay also, mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually. This is just mention of us two-legged. There is all creation still need to be respected.
And as stewards, we need to be mindful of all the users because it's precious. The water's precious. That's a healing song.
When I was in college, in a social psychology class, I saw a documentary called Down on the Farm. It was all about the devastating impacts of modern agriculture on ecosystems and farm workers, the soil erosion, the water and air pollution, habitat destruction, human health effects. I was galvanized. I suddenly knew my purpose in life to develop farming systems that would be sustainable, that would build soil, sequester carbon, improve wildlife habitat, clean up water and air, result in healthy human communities. Everybody eats, and I could not think of a single thing more important or useful to do than help them do it sustainably. So off I went to graduate school. Well, after a few years of learning about ecology, environmental science, farming, I had come to believe that there was no way to grow food for humans that did not have serious ecological impacts. Even small-scale organic farming changed the structure and function of landscapes and irreparably harmed wildlife populations. In places like California, where large-scale irrigation was necessary to grow crops, this was doubly true. Modern humans were just bad news for ecosystems, taking all the primary productivity for ourselves and leaving nothing for the other creatures of the earth. These were the beliefs taught by the best environmental scientists in the country, along with the idea that when Europeans arrived in the Americas, they found a vast wilderness untrammeled by man. Indigenous peoples had lived there in small bands of innocent, roving hunter-gatherers, but they didn't really count, and anyway, they were all gone now. The best way to keep islands of biodiversity alive, the thinking went, was to preserve them with wilderness status. Humans were inherently rapacious and could not be trusted to take care of the land. So we should keep the untrained and undeserving out of any place we wanted to preserve. Only those who had the right knowledge and commitment, the scientists, should be allowed in. Despite my understanding that agriculture was an inherently harmful activity, or maybe because of it, I decided that we could at least reduce its impacts. We could at least improve its sustainability. So that was my work for 20 years. And in all that time, I carried a weight of grief and shame and fear and anger so heavy that finally it dragged me to the ground. Humans were bad for the earth, and I was a human, and no matter what I did or didn't do, I was causing harm to some other being somewhere else. I came to a place where I lost all hope. Now, I want to pause this story here to say how interesting it is to me now, how very like this set of beliefs is to the doctrines of sin taught by various Christian sects. The Christian doctrine of original sin, developed by St. Augustine in the 4th century, says that humans are born in a state of complete separation from the divine. According to Augustine, Jesus was sent to save humans from this state of separation. Jesus' death and resurrection would restore believers to a state of unity with God after their death. They would go to heaven if they were baptized in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. It's important to note that not all Christians believed in this doctrine. In medieval times, Abelard wrote that it was a barbaric notion of God that did more damage to Christianity than any enemies of the church ever did. But the doctrine of original sin provided justification for the project of empire on the part of the church, and so it was accepted by the Roman Emperor Constantine as a very sound doctrine. In Calvinism later, original sin morphed into the concept of salvation of the elect, in which humans are understood to be entirely depraved and corrupt, with no capacity to bring good into the world, which itself was a place of nothing but evil and corruption. God had decided at the beginning of time who would be saved and who would be damned for all eternity, and the way to tell was to read the signs. Prosperity was a sign of the elect. As an aside, many historians say that this is the root of our nation's obsession with capitalism and hoarding personal wealth. Imagine, then, the shock of the Puritans, who were Calvinists, when they met the indigenous peoples of the eastern American coast. These peoples understood themselves as inherently good and beautiful, living in a good and beautiful world. As I mentioned earlier, they understood themselves to be one kind of people among many. There were the bear people and the goose people and the otter people, the maple people and the salmon people, the thunder beings. The list goes on and on. All of these peoples were part of one family, born of the union of earth and sky, and each kind of people had their own role in the family. The way to flourish in this world was to care for one's relatives, all of the other people in one's human family, and all of the other peoples of the larger family. To not care for one's relatives would be to fall prey to a deadly sickness that endangered not only one's own life, but all of life. Harmony and balance among all of the relatives was paramount, and all decisions were made with this balance in mind for the next 7 generations of the two-leggeds, who had the longest lifespan. It was understood that some of the relatives in the family, like deer and rabbit, salmon and trout, turkey and grouse, corn and melon and beans and squash, had agreed to give their lives to others in exchange for honor and respect and gratitude. Hunters and fishers knew never to kill unnecessarily, and they and farmers knew never to waste a single particle of the bodies of the other relatives. Ceremonies and dances honored the spirits of those relatives who gave their lives to others. In this way, the balance was kept. It was kept and it was actively loved and celebrated. Life was understood to be beautiful and good and full of joy, and the most important activity of all was to feel and express gratitude. Of course, it's important not to romanticize these people. They were humans, just like other humans, meaning of course there was jealousy and hatred and greed and rage and lust and desire for power among them. But these emotions were actively discouraged in children and treated as a sickness requiring treatment in adults. So the culture of seeing beauty in the balance among the relatives of all the family of earth and living life as one long, joyful prayer of gratitude was developed to a very high degree. Imagine how shocking this was to the Calvinist Puritans to meet people who loved their world, who loved themselves and each other, who sang joyful songs of praise and gratitude every hour of every day, who ornamented their faces and bodies with bright colors, who laughed and sang while they worked, who danced and feasted and joked and played games and told stories for hours and sometimes even days at a time. It was equally shocking to the Spanish conquistadores and the priests who followed them in the southeast, the southwest, and on the west coast. The native peoples felt sorry for these dreary folks and treated them as if they were quite ill. How else could you explain their fever for gold? Their belief that people were not inherently in a state of balance and beauty. Their belief that the earth was a bad place, given with all its creatures to humans alone to dominate, and that pieces of it could be owned. Yes, these people must be quite ill, so the natives took them in and treated them with hospitality and kindness. As Alice Walker has written, this turned out to be a mistake. Now, to return to the story I began with, as a mixed-race adult trained in Western environmental science, I had come to a point where I lost all hope. And then I encountered an ethnobotanist named Kat Anderson. Kat spent her career studying the uses of plants by the indigenous peoples of the American West, with a particular focus on Central California. The first time I met her, she spoke of contemporary Patwin and Miwok women crisscrossing the central and coastal valleys on traditional routes between traditional sites, gathering supplies to make baskets. These women also were cultivating traditional foods like their grandmothers before them and their grandmothers before them. Kat showed photographs of the foods and the meals the women prepared, of which she was invited to partake. She said the foods were delicious and, when grown in the traditional ways, require very little water. Some, but very little. I felt a tiny stirring of hope. The native peoples and their life ways were not gone from California. They were very much still here, and they knew how to make and grow everything they needed sustainably. What's more, they were willing to share what they know because it would help heal the world. The next time I heard Kat speak, she shared research she'd done a couple decades earlier in the central foothills of the Sierras, talking to tribal elders there. This particular tribe had lived in those parts for thousands of years. Their lands were not taken from them by either the Spanish or the Americans because they weren't particularly valuable for farming or grazing, and there was no gold. The elders often lived to be over 100 years old because they lived such a healthful life. Their main staple was acorns, but they also ate an enormous variety of other foods, from mushrooms to manzanita berries, from deer to rabbits to crayfish. They worked in groups with a ceremonial song for every activity. Their shared life had meaning and purpose and was filled with joyful movement. And here was the thing that turned my world upside down. They intensively managed the ecosystems in which they lived. They had a highly sophisticated understanding of the plants and animals in their community, as well as the ecological processes they managed. They used controlled burning to maximize biodiversity, prevent catastrophic fires, keep big trees big, and keep forest dust from building up and hosting insects that ate acorns and bit people. They used coppicing in some kinds of oak trees to maximize their acorn yields. In riparian areas, they managed sedges, reeds, willows, and redbud for highly specific uses in basket making and cordage. They managed for diameter, length, color, and other properties of the fibers. As a result of these practices, their lands boasted sugar pines 6 feet in diameter and oak trees whose branches stretched 60 feet in every direction. On the healthy forest floor, mushrooms and flowering plants grew in profusion, flowers being essential to the mental health and well-being of all. They made a refreshing drink by running water over mashed manzanita berries. The elders described the relationship they had with the community of life in which they lived as reciprocal and profoundly intimate. They had a specific role in it, and so did all of the other relatives. They kept certain grassy areas clear of trees so the deer and elk would flourish, and in return, the deer and elk gave them a few lives each year so they could flourish. They tended the oak trees, and the oak trees gave them literally tons of acorns. Once, Kat was talking with an elder and said, "So the jays bury the acorns and then forget where they are, and that's how the new trees get started?" And the woman said, "They don't forget, that's their job." Dr. Robin Wall Kimmerer, a member of the Potawatomi Nation and professor of environmental science at SUNY in Syracuse, is another biologist who has written extensively on indigenous relationships with plants. In her exquisitely beautiful book, Braiding Sweetgrass, She writes of a grad student who wanted to understand why sweetgrass in the Northeast was declining. Sweetgrass is a very important plant in indigenous cultures all over North America, intensively used for baskets, cordage, and religious ceremonies. Some of the local indigenous elder women said that it was important to harvest sweetgrass in a certain way. Others said it was important to harvest it in a different way. The graduate student compared the two methods to a control group of sites that were not harvested at all. The botany professors on her thesis committee doubted the study would contribute anything new to science, saying that of course the one that is left alone will do the best. Everyone knows that humans just damage everything and plants grow best when left alone. But it turned out that both methods of harvesting produced similar results in terms of plant growth and reproduction, and that both produced much better results than leaving the plants alone. These plants had co-evolved with humans. Human interaction with them was essential for their survival. They were declining because humans had been forced to leave the relationship. When Kat Anderson was interviewing those tribal elders, one woman spoke of how sad it is that so many modern people don't go out gathering and tending the plants. She said, "Nature loves us and misses us. Nature loves us and misses us." The ecosystems in North America, it turns out, were not wildernesses untrammeled by man when white people arrived on this continent. They were intensively managed by humans. The people and plants and animals here co-evolved over thousands and thousands of years. Human interaction with each ecosystem was essential to its function. All of the fabulous beauty and richness and biodiversity that the explorers and pioneers encountered when they arrived here were the direct result of human intelligence and understanding. But human intelligence and understanding directed to a purpose that most European Americans have never understood: the flourishing of all of the relatives in the family of beings, the thriving of the whole community of life in love and joy. Nature loves us and misses us. Our Mother Earth loves us. Human beings can be agents of beauty and goodness. The knowledge of how to live in this beautiful world sustainably with love and joy and gratitude has been greatly diminished by the genocide of Native Americans, but a goodly amount of it is still here. The people who have this knowledge are still here in every part of the country. And they're offering us this knowledge now because they know it's the key to the survival of not only our own species, but also of all of our relations. Now, we European Americans could just say thanks and take this knowledge like we've taken everything else. But the better course would be to develop real relationships with the local indigenous peoples wherever we live, and join with them in their struggle for justice. Only if we do that is there any chance we can heal this particular fracture in our national psyche. Indigenous peoples have experienced 500 years of terrible trauma from genocide and colonization, and that trauma is still ongoing. We need to apologize and do all we can to make restitution as a nation. Then we can return to balance and harmony within the whole community of life. Then our hearts will be free and our ears can open to the song of love and joy that our Mother Earth sings. Then we can dance with all beings to that song. Amen. Blessed be all our relations.
Love is the spirit of this church, and service its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. This congregation depends entirely upon the generosity of its members and friends. All that we give in time, talent, and treasure is what sustains this community and makes it not just a sanctuary for us to return to for spiritual nourishment, but an oasis from which we can go out into the world carrying the waters of life. Each fourth Sunday, our congregation donates to a local organization that shares our values. Today, that organization is Community Action of Napa Valley. All checks and donations will be sent to the Community Action of Napa Valley, unless the check is marked as pledge in the memo line. All checks should be made out to NVUU. You can donate by going to the link that is in the chat now, or going to our website at nvuu.org and clicking on the donate button. Or you can send a check to us at NVUU, 1625 Salvador Avenue, Napa, California, 94558. The offering will now be gratefully received.
Thank you for your many gifts. All you give and all you do are vital in not only sustaining this particular religious community, but also building beloved community in Napa and the wider region beyond. I especially want to thank Thompson for being our celebrant this morning, and I want to thank Brian Shaw and Tricia Lewis for helping us with our closing hymn, and thanks to Brian also for producing the video. Thank you to May Vader, our administrative assistant, and Charlie Toledo, the director of the Susquehanna Intertribal Council, for connecting us with several of our guests this morning. Thank you to all of our guests for sharing their gifts with us. And I want to thank all of you for being here this morning and remind you that we will have a social hour on Zoom after the service where we'll do any announcements and share any invitations into community. We'll also have a listening session where we'll break out into a separate group kind of midway through the social hour where a member of the board, a member of the ministerial formation team, and I will be there listening to you about any ideas you have for how to increase our opportunities for connection during these times when we can't be together in person. So our closing words come to us from Dr. Robin Wall Kimmerer. Knowing that you love the earth challenges you. Our closing words come to us from Dr. Robin Wall Kimmerer. Knowing that you love the earth changes you, activates you to defend and protect and celebrate. But when you feel the earth loves you in return, that feeling transforms the relationship into a sacred bond. May that bond nourish you in the week ahead. Now let's join Trisha in singing our closing song, number 21 in our gray hymnal, For the Beauty of the Earth.
For the beauty of the earth, for the splendor of the skies, for the love which from our birth over and around us lies. Source of all to thee we raise this our hymn of grateful praise. For the joy of ear and eye, for the heart and mind's delight, for the mystic harmony, linking sense to sound and sight. Source of all to thee we raise this our hymn of grateful praise. For the wonder of each hour of the day and of the night, hill and vale and tree and flower, sun and moon and stars of light. Source of all to thee we raise this our hymn of grateful praise. For the joy of human care, sister, brother, parent, child, for the kinship we all share, for all gentle thoughts and mild. Source of all to thee we raise this our hymn of grateful praise.
We extinguish this chalice, but not the light of truth, the warmth of love, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts out into the world until we meet again. And now, people of this beloved community, every one of you is an indispensable member of the family of life, a beloved relative with particular gifts to share and a particular job to do. Go forth from this time knowing how deeply you belong. Go shining. Blessed be.